Okay, let me actually now bring up or touch upon a topic which Amit was getting towards a little earlier on, and that is, of course, the government's involvement or the public sector's involvement. And let me just go across to you Vinay on that, because the whole idea of making CSR spending mandatory, to what extent do you feel that's justified?
I think it's going to happen in any case. Okay. So I don't think we should waste too much time discussing it. And I will let me just elaborate that. I know we are in a business setting and we tend to resist.
And also the 2% figure. I mean,
Yeah. So coming to a 2% figure, when we look at the 500 largest publicly listed companies in India, the sales of these companies is 37 lakh crores. The profits of these companies are 4 lakh crores. 2% is 8,000 crores, which is peanuts. Okay. In fact, companies which are not spending much more of their profit in terms of what I mentioned, reducing their negative effects, adding to the positive effects in the community, etc. I worry for those companies. They will not survive. If you are not flowing back 5%, 10% of your profits in this, it is a dangerous signal.
Okay, fair enough. But I know there are a lot of differing opinions about this.
I have a little different viewpoint. I'm not sure whether it should be compulsory or not. I don't have a definite view, both sides. But coming back to what Amit said, government spends crores and crores of money in social sector. And right from Rajiv Gandhi's time, it has been admitted that 80 to 85% goes in mismanagement and corruption. Why don't corporates, industrial bodies like CII, FICCI, SOCHM, and the civil society together demand accountability? Our shareholders demand accountability from us. We can't get away from that. Why are we shying away from demanding? That will make a real impact. But we are so afraid to do something like that. Individually, it would be difficult. What can corporate India with 1 or 2% do? It's very insignificant. They have to do for their own sake. I'm not taking that away. But to make an impact, it would have to be stopping the leakages from the government. This I feel very
sure. If you can get that funded, that would be extremely good CSR.
What funded? You don't need funding for that. You need guts to question the government.
Let me bring in Mr. Mariwal. I know you have something to say.
I think I'll agree with Anu, what she's saying, but I completely disagree with Vinay. Completely disagree. Because, first of all, it will not become mandatory. I can guarantee you it will not become mandatory. I have had enough dialogues at a regulatory level. Because I'm saying that you cannot force at one level. Even if you make it mandatory, people will misuse it. Secondly, what is CSR? Tomorrow they will question innovation is not CSR. I am doing work for my brand Sesafol. I am doing a lot of hard camps. How do I prove it is CSR or not? It's a hotbed of income tax disputes. You will have illegal, if you don't want to give money, you will give it to some charitable institute just to set up, you will get a kickback. It is not something which is actually going to be effective. Though what you say theoretically is right, but very difficult to implement that. So I am saying that it is to be reinforced. I think most likely what the government is likely to do, from what I know, is they will make it mandatory for corporates to write in their annual accounts what is the percentage of activity they are spending on CSR. And thereby reinforcing the need to do CSR, which is perfectly all right. But not make mandatory when people don't want to give something and then start misusing this by wrong declarations. Again, disputes relating to what is CSR, what is not CSR. So I think there are many other issues which makes it very complicated. 8,000 crores is not really that large a sum as Advanu was saying.
Let me just bring in Rita for a moment.
I think it's been very easy to focus on the 2% as a number and as a concept and the mandating versus not mandating. But rather, what really would be great, and Abha, I'm going to direct this to you, representing media, is to focus on the content of the voluntary guidelines. Not perfect, but an amazing direction. And even the process in creating the guidelines has been very participatory. It's involved civil society, it's involved industry associations, it's involved industry itself. And I think they've really made an attempt to bring in some definition around what it is that CSR is, and they're not even calling the guidelines CSR, which is what's also wonderful about it. So I think 2%, 10%, whatever the idea is, I think what we really need to focus on is the content and the fact that we really want to get a space where we're sharing more ideas on activities that are impactful and going to affect society.
I just wanted to clarify that I did not say that it should or should not be mandated. I just said it's going to happen. and the reason why...
What is your view on this?
Yeah.
I perceived that you were in agreement with that.
But I tell you, our learning in Karmayog in the last 6 years is that the complexities of India are such that problems of the nation, forget city, even a small ward in a city cannot be solved by government. It cannot be solved by the civil society. They can only point out to it. It is only corporates who have the resources and the ability to find out solutions for this, and they have to get involved. It's not the question of 2%, and that is why corporates just have to get involved.
I totally agree that the corporates have to play responsibility. All I am saying is it should not be mandatory. That's all, because by doing it mandatory, you are going to have a lot of tax disputes. You will have disputes about what is CSR, what is not CSR, and those who don't want to pay, they will find a way to actually make money on the side by donating to somebody else who is not actually such dummy institution created for under the garb of CSR.
But let me bring in Amit.
Yeah, so I have a combination of takes on this. First of all, I think it's much better to find other ways to encourage companies to do more in the CSR space. And certainly, I think making it mandatory to disclose what you're doing is probably a much more logical next step. And hopefully, investors, consumers, media will judge these companies whether they're doing good work or not against certain benchmarks. And hopefully that will drive the image of these companies, and they'll start deciding to step up the activities if they're below the average, and I think that alone is probably an appropriate next step. Now, I think if the government decides, and I honestly have no input that they are or not going to do it, but if they do decide to make it mandatory, then my view is that if it is mandatory, whatever is the number 1 or 2 or 3%, then I think it should actually be a direct offset against the full taxes that you pay. So you will probably see a transformative effect, but I don't think it should basically be mandatory. It should be voluntary, and if people choose to do so, give them an offset, and that will actually encourage them to do more work.
And you agree with that, Anu, of course?
I don't know about the compulsory bit. I'm not sure. A part of me says no, the rebellious side, and the fears that Harsh has said, that for people will use it in wrong ways. At the same time, I know that many things would not have happened unless it was made compulsory. Taking this people who are at a disadvantage, or SC, ST, that hasn't become compulsory, but you leave it to voluntary, women's participation. I mean, CII conducted a survey, and if you take the entire CII corporate members, and I would like to think they're pretty enlightened, it's not even coming to 6%. That's women's participation. Okay. So how long will you expect people to do it voluntarily?
I guess everyone's in agreement on the fact that while maybe there has been a change, a perceptible change over the last few years, a lot more still needs to be done by corporates as a whole, regardless of what the government is or is not doing. But I think what we can safely call it is a work in progress. And as Rita said, it's good to know that there are some examples out there that it is happening at some level. So on that positive note, I'd like to thank all of our panelists very much, each and every one of you, for making it here tonight and contributing all your thoughts, and to all of you for being here as well. It's great to have such a wonderful audience.